And then because I'm always looking for an opportunity to talk about my specific interests, just my personal fandoms, the next couple of sentences in the paragraph go on to talk about the son of King Louis the Pious, and how actually King Louis the Pious himself visited one of his sons as a ghost. Quoting, "A bit later, the continuator of the Annals of Fulda recalls how King Louis the Germanic devoted himself devoutly to prayer during Lent in 878. One night, his deceased father, Emperor Louis the Pious, appeared to him to entreat him in the name of Christ and the Trinity to pull his father out of the torments of the hereafter. Terrified by his vision, the king had his tale written down and sent it to all the monasteries in the kingdom so that all the monks would pray to God for the salvation of the deceased emperor." And I especially like that little feedback, or not, that's not called a feedback, that's called an anecdote. I especially like that little anecdote because the 9th century is just, if I'm autistic, it's one of my special interests. The 10th century too. This is not Robert Longshore, is set primarily in the 10th century, and his childhood is in the 9th century. So, like I told you, if you really want to know a decade or a century really well, the way you do that is by getting to know the decade or the century before it, and then the decade or century before that. So I got to know the 10th century fairly well, and then I know this because I did it backward. I went forward instead of backward. So I went to the 11th century to see what the 10th century was like, and that doesn't work. So now I'm in the 8th and the 9th. I actually went back. I went all the way back to the beginning of time, beginning of human time. I went 300, 500, a million years ago to try to understand history, and that's what I've spent the last 5 years specializing in, understanding the last million years of history, because I love the 9th century that much. But what I especially love about the 9th and 10th centuries is the names of the French and German kings are so funny. They're so funny because the ones that got titles, they're almost all ironic. Almost none of them are honorifics. So Louis the Pious, his name is not Louis the Pious because his people and his historians and his biographers liked how pious he was. So that Louis the Pious, ironically pious, comes back and as a ghost to his son is like, "Oh, I did terrible things as a king. I was not the Christian I thought I was." It's just really funny to me. And I just especially love that I learned that about this guy in this book. Yeah, sure, 878 is when Rob was 3 years old, so it's a little bit too early for me to do like this anecdote in the book anywhere, because Rob doesn't meet this Louis the German, right? I'm sorry, Louis the Germanic. So he has no reason to know about this story that happened when he was 3 years old, right? I just love these anecdotes, though. I love them so much. They called Louis the Pious because he preferred to spend his time in prayer rather than marshaling his troops to war. So his empire just slowly crumbled around him.